What happens when the world's most produced supersonic fighter faces off against a fourth-generation, American-built jet in one of the most politically volatile regions on Earth? In February 2019, the skies above the India-Pakistan border became the stage for a clash that stunned the world. A vintage MiG-21 Bison, originally designed in the 1950s, locked horns with a far more modern F-16 fighting Falcon in a deadly aerial dance. What followed sparked headlines, denials, celebrations, and outrage. But beyond the noise of nationalism and news stickers, one question still lingers. What really happened in the 2019 Balakot clash? This isn't just about two jets and a dogfight. It's about technology, legacy, pride, and propaganda. Because what took place that day didn't just shake the military strategies of two nuclear-armed neighbors, it also forced the world to confront a deeper truth. In modern warfare, perception can be just as powerful as firepower. In this video, we'll peel back the layers of conflicting reports, radar logs, political statements, and satellite data. We'll walk you through the tangled history of the MiG-21 and F-16, two aircraft born from very different military philosophies during the Cold War, but still finding themselves entangled in 21st century warfare. We'll revisit the events that led up to the Balakot airstrikes, the dramatic escalation that followed, the moment Indian Wing Commander Abhinand Varthaman found himself in enemy territory, and the lingering controversy over whether an F-16 was actually shot down that day. But this story is bigger than one encounter. It's a story of aging machines pushed beyond their limits, of global alliances, strategic deterrence, and the invisible chessboard of aerial combat. And most of all, it's a story of how truth, in the fog of war, can become its first casualty. So, strap in, because what you're about to hear isn't just a breakdown of radar tracks and missile locks, it's a journey into the heart of one of the most misunderstood aerial encounters of the modern era. To understand how two radically different machines, the MiG-21 and the F-16, ended up facing off in the skies above South Asia, we have to go back, not to 2019, not even to the Cold War, but to the very genesis of modern air combat itself. It began, like many great innovations, with a simple but terrifying question during World War I. What if an enemy plane could outmaneuver us before we even saw it? The answer came quickly: dogfights, aerial duels that demanded faster, lighter, and more agile machines. From propellers to jet engines, the evolution was swift and brutal. By the 1950s, the dawn of the jet age brought with it a new battlefield, the stratosphere. Aircraft no longer fought at visual range alone. Speed, radar, and missiles redefined what it meant to dominate the skies. Nations scrambled to gain aerial supremacy, and two ideologies, the West and the Soviet bloc, began shaping fighters not just as weapons, but as statements of technological might. The Soviet Union's answer came in 1959, with a plane that would go on to become the most widely produced supersonic jet in history, the MiG-21. Sleek, fast, and unforgiving, it was designed for one purpose: with a delta wing, powerful engine, and blistering climb rate, it was a Cold War workhorse, cheap to build, simple to maintain, deadly in numbers. But in the West, another school of thought was brewing, one that challenged the notion that speed alone wins wars. Enter John Boyd Maverick, U.S. Air Force pilot and strategist. Boyd believed agility, awareness, and maneuverability were key, not just raw power. His ideas would influence the birth of a fighter that defied heavy, expensive trends, a fighter that prioritized pilot vision, quick turns, and rapid response. That fighter would become the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Yet before these two titans ever locked sights, they were shaped by vastly different realities. The MiG-21, a child of mass production and Soviet doctrine designed to operate from rough airfields and strike in short bursts. The F-16, born from technological finesse and Western air superiority doctrine, built for multi-role dominance, capable of precision strikes and surgical dogfights. But the tensions between India and Pakistan gave these aircraft a second life. Both nations inherited or purchased versions of these fighters, each adapting them to their evolving doctrines. For India, the MiG-21 became a symbol of legacy, upgraded into the MiG-21 Bison. It was fitted with modern radar and missiles to remain relevant. For Pakistan, the F-16 became a crown jewel purchased under shifting alliances. It offered not just capability, but deterrence. And so, decades after their Cold War births, these fighters found themselves operating in the narrow valleys and high skies of the Indian subcontinent, of a terrain where seconds matter and history never really lets go. But how did we get from concept to combat, from blueprints in Moscow and prototypes in Fort Worth to a 2019 showdown that would rewrite the rules of South Asian aerial politics? In the next chapter, we'll meet the minds behind the machine's designers, pilots, and policymakers, and explore how the first working versions of these aircraft shocked the world and changed the nature of aerial warfare forever. In the race for air dominance during the Cold War, ideas alone weren't enough. What mattered was execution, fast, functional, and fearsome. The MiG-21 and the F-16 both came to life under intense geopolitical pressure, but their stories, their breakthroughs, couldn't be more different. Let's begin in the Soviet Union. The year was 1955. Western jets were evolving rapidly, and the Soviets needed a lightweight, supersonic interceptor that could counter NATO threats. The Mikoyan-Gurevich Design Bureau, already famed for the MiG-15 and MiG-17, was tasked with something revolutionary. What emerged was the Dat-2, a prototype with swept wings, but early flight tests showed it lacked the stability and performance needed at high speeds. Then came the turning point: delta wings. Inspired by the French Mirage 3, Soviet engineers shifted to a delta wing configuration. It was a bold move. Delta wings meant better supersonic performance and a stronger frame for withstanding high-G maneuvers. By 1956, the V4 took to the skies, and just 3 years later, the world met the MiG-21A, an aircraft that could break Mach 2, carry heat-seeking missiles, and scramble into the air in under 5 minutes. Its design was minimalist, yet deadly. No frills, no luxury, just raw, stripped-down performance. It had no onboard radar in its early versions, no sophisticated avionics, but it didn't need them. Not in Soviet doctrine. The MiG-21 was meant to intercept, fire, and vanish. Swarms of them, launched in waves, were the Soviets' vision of air superiority. Now shift westward. By the late 1960s, America had just emerged from Vietnam and learned the hard way that high-tech, heavy aircraft weren't always the answer. Complex fighters like the F-4 Phantom had struggled in dogfights. Speed and missiles weren't enough. Pilots needed agility. Enter John Boyd, U.S. Air Force colonel and a man many considered a heretic. Boyd wasn't just a pilot, he was a theorist. He developed the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act, a decision-making cycle that emphasized split-second advantage in combat. But more than that, he championed a radical idea that the next fighter jet needed to be light, fast, and designed around the pilot, not the tech. Boyd and a group of like-minded rebels known as the Fighter Mafia began challenging the Pentagon's obsession with large, complex aircraft. They proposed a small, agile jet with minimal electronics but unmatched maneuverability. Against the odds, their vision was accepted barely and led to a competition known as the Lightweight Fighter Program. The result: a prototype codenamed YF-16, built by General Dynamics. In 1974, during an impromptu demonstration, the YF-16 accidentally lifted off the runway mid-high-speed taxi test. The pilot decided to keep flying. That accidental flight stunned observers and proved the jet's control, power, and fly-by-wire system were ready for the skies. The YF-16's breakthrough wasn't just its agility, it was the first production fighter to use a fly-by-wire computer-mediated control system that adjusted the aircraft's flight surfaces thousands of times per second. It meant the F-16 could be naturally unstable, designed that way on purpose, and yet remain perfectly flyable. This instability gave it lightning-fast turns and unmatched responsiveness. It also introduced a bubble canopy for 360-degree pilot visibility, a side-stick control for easier maneuvering, and a single engine designed to keep it affordable and simple to maintain. These innovations would redefine fighter design for decades to come. But none of this came easy. Boyd and his team faced fierce opposition from Pentagon brass and defense contractors invested in bigger, costlier projects. At one point, funding was nearly pulled, but performance won the day. In 1976, the F-16 was officially selected as the U.S. Air Force's next fighter. Meanwhile, the MiG-21 had already spread across the globe, mass-produced in the USSR, and licensed in India, China, and elsewhere. It had fought in Vietnam, the Middle East, and Africa. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. For many air forces, it was their first taste of supersonic power, and so, by the 1980s, both jets had established themselves. One an aging Cold War relic, still being pushed to new limits. The other a modern marvel that would keep evolving, for decades. Yet no one could have predicted that, over 3 decades later, upgraded versions of both would meet in a real combat scenario. But they would, in 2019, and when they did, the world would be watching. Next, we'll trace how these jets evolved from their first flights to their modern variants, what changed, who changed it, and how both fighters were kept alive long past their expected retirement. Because the story of the MiG-21 and the F-16 isn't just about flight, it's about survival. By the time the MiG-21 and F-16 met in the skies above Kashmir in 2019, neither aircraft was supposed to still be flying, let alone fighting. The MiG-21 had been designed in the 1950s, the F-16 in the early 1970s, and yet, both platforms had defied the odds, not just surviving history, but adapting to it. Their parallel evolution across decades reveals a fascinating tale of reinvention, politics, and resilience, a technological arms race shaped by necessity, innovation, and sometimes desperation. Let's begin with the MiG-21. After its Cold War debut in 1959, the MiG-21 rapidly became the workhorse of the Eastern Bloc. Its simplicity, low cost, and mass production appeal made it a favorite among Soviet allies. The first production variant, the MiG-21F, lacked radar but delivered raw speed, capable of reaching Mach 2. But combat experience, especially in Vietnam, revealed its shortcomings: limited range, poor visibility, and basic avionics. Through the 1960s and 70s, Soviet engineers responded. The MiG-21PF, PFM, and MF models followed, each incorporating improvements in radar, avionics, and armament. By the MiG-21 Bis in 1972, the platform had matured into a lethal short-range interceptor, now capable of carrying more modern missiles and improved jamming countermeasures. But it wasn't until India stepped in that the MiG-21 found its second life. India began operating the MiG-21 in 1963, eventually manufacturing the aircraft domestically under license. Despite several upgrades over the decades, the limitations of the aging fleet were undeniable until the late 1990s, when India unveiled a sweeping modernization plan, the MiG-21 Bison. The Bison upgrade was, in essence, a technological resurrection. It fitted the old airframe with Israeli and Russian avionics, a powerful radar system, helmet-mounted sight (HMS), and the ability to fire modern air-to-air missiles like the R-73. The goal: turn a Cold War relic into a 21st century dogfighter. Across the border, Pakistan was experiencing a different evolution. The F-16 Fighting Falcon, after winning the US lightweight fighter competition in the 1970s, became the cornerstone of American air power through the 80s and beyond. But its design philosophy ensured it was more than a US success. It became an export phenomenon. By the mid-1980s, Pakistan, aligned with the United States during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, secured a deal to procure F-16s under the Foreign Military Sales FMS program. The F-16AB Block 15s were delivered between 1983 and 1987. Pakistan's Air Force quickly learned to exploit the jet's agility, radar power, and multi-role flexibility. But politics intervened. In the 1990s, due to concerns over Pakistan's nuclear program, the US halted future F-16 sales under the Pressler Amendment. 28 F-16s, already paid for, were locked away in storage, never delivered. During this hiatus, Pakistan turned to China for alternatives, acquiring aircraft like the J-7A MiG-21 derivative, and later co-developing the JF-17 Thunder. Yet the F-16's superiority remained unmatched in Pakistan's fleet. When relations warmed in the 2000s, a new wave of deliveries began. F-16C D Block 52 variants, along with upgrades for older models via the Midlife Update MLU program. These MLU upgrades brought older F-16S closer to parity with modern fighters, with enhanced radar, data link systems, beyond visual range missile capability, including AIM-120, AMRAAM-S, and night attack avionics. So by the late 2010s, both air forces India and Pakistan were flying deeply upgraded versions of Cold War-era jets, but the context had changed. These planes were no longer symbols of brute force. They had become precision tools, wielded as part of broader doctrines of deterrence, surveillance, and rapid response. In India, the MiG-21 Bison continued serving as a frontline quick reaction alert interceptor. Despite increasing accidents and an aging fleet, the Indian Air Force kept them in rotation, often scrambling them within minutes to intercept unknown aerial intrusions near borders. Pakistan, meanwhile, used its F-16s not just for air patrols, but for precision-guided operations integrated into a network-centric doctrine that emphasized coordination with AWACS, ground-based radars, and electronic warfare assets. But while both nations had upgraded hardware, the stakes had escalated, too. The introduction of nuclear weapons into both India and Pakistan's strategic calculus in the late 90s changed everything. Suddenly, every aerial confrontation had to be managed, not just for tactical gain, but for escalation control. The Kargil War in 1999, the Balakot attack in 2016, and then Pulwama in 2019, each raised the risk of air conflict. And it was this backdrop that set the stage for the Balakot airstrikes and the aerial engagement that followed. But before we reach that high-stakes moment, it's worth pausing to recognize what had been accomplished. Two aircraft, conceived in completely different worlds, one in the closed halls of Soviet doctrines, the other in the theoretical war rooms of the US Air Force, had not only endured but evolved. They had adapted to new radars, weapons, and roles. They had become icons of regional strategy. And, remarkably, they were now being flown by pilots who weren't even born when these jets were first designed. That's not just a testament to engineering, it's a lesson in how legacy platforms can become living systems, upgraded, reimagined, kept alive through necessity and vision. But no matter how modern the upgrade, aerial combat remains deeply human. And in the fog of war, it's not the airframe alone that determines the outcome. It's the pilot's training, the decisions made in split seconds, and the invisible pressure of geopolitics bearing down from above. In the next section, we'll examine how, in early 2019, this tension boiled over, when a suicide bombing in Pulwama set off a chain reaction leading to India's airstrikes in Balakot, Pakistan's response, and a dogfight that would pit old machines in a new war, while the entire world held its breath. By the time the MiG-21 and the F-16 clashed in 2019, these aircraft were no longer just military platforms. They had become national symbols, deeply embedded in the identity, security, and public imagination of their respective nations. Their adoption wasn't just widespread, it was strategic, deliberate, and, above all, emotional. Let's start with the MiG-21. India's relationship with the MiG-21 was not merely technical, it was transformative. Acquired in the early 1960s, it marked India's first foray into the world of supersonic flight. With its induction, India became only the fourth nation on Earth to operate a supersonic jet. But the real revolution came when India began manufacturing the aircraft domestically under license, a bold move that catapulted Hindustan Aeronautics Limited (HAL) into global aerospace relevance. Suddenly, India wasn't just buying jets, it was building them, training pilots on them, and deploying them in real combat. By the 1971 Indo-Pak War, MiG-21s had proven their mettle, scoring aerial victories against more advanced opponents. The Indian public embraced the MiG-21 as a point of pride, a symbol of self-reliance in the skies. Its shrill roar overhead became synonymous with India's growing might, but societal adoption came with a cost. As the years passed and the fleet aged, crashes mounted. The MiG-21 earned a grim nickname, Flying Coffin. Public pressure mounted, yet India kept them flying, not out of neglect, but necessity. Upgrades were more affordable than replacements, and for quick reaction interception missions, the upgraded Bison variant remained surprisingly capable. Now shift to Pakistan. For decades, Pakistan Air Force officials described the F-16 as a game-changer. More than any other platform, it redefined Pakistan's air doctrine. From its arrival in the 1980s, the F-16 was used to intercept Soviet aircraft during the Afghan conflict, to test India's air defenses, and to assert technological parity. But the jet wasn't just a tool of war, it was a diplomatic bridge. The F-16 represented Pakistan's alliance with the West. Every upgrade, every delivery, every new deal was closely watched by domestic media and neighboring rivals. Pakistani pilots were trained by US instructors. Tactics were refined, and when the Block 52 variants arrived in the 2000s with modern weapons and night strike capabilities, it signaled Pakistan's leap into a more networked, precision air strategy. Culturally, the F-16 took on a near mythical status, displayed in air shows, celebrated in national documentaries. Pilots who flew them were national heroes. In Pakistan, saying F-16 evoked more than a jet. It meant superiority, survivability, and sovereign pride. But this mainstream embrace also came with strategic shifts. Both India and Pakistan reorganized their air forces around these aircraft. Training protocols, radar stations, missile inventories, all adapted to support the extended operational life of these fighters. In India, MiG-21 squadrons became key elements in border defense. In Pakistan, F-16 squadrons formed the backbone of higher readiness strike capability. And beyond the military, these jets began influencing political decisions, procurement contracts, defense budgets, even foreign policy negotiations were shaped by the presence or absence of these aircraft. By the 2010s, the transformation was complete. These weren't just jets, they were geopolitical instruments, designed for the Cold War, refined for the modern battlefield, and weaponized in the court of global opinion. This is why, when Balakot happened, and when an F-16 and a MiG-21 collided in combat, it wasn't just a military moment, it was a symbolic confrontation, playing out on a stage that extended from radar screens to news studios. In the next chapter, we'll explore the modern battlefield, the advanced upgrades, evolving doctrines, and new threats that define the contemporary era of these legacy warbirds, and how both nations prepared them for one last fight. By the 2010s, the MiG-21 and F-16 were no longer simply aging aircraft. They had been re-engineered into modern fighting platforms, each adapted to fit the tactical philosophies and economic realities of their respective nations. Their survival wasn't a fluke. It was the result of careful upgrades, systems integration, and a clear-eyed assessment of what air power meant in a volatile region like South Asia. Let's start with the MiG-21 Bison, the Indian Air Force's final and most advanced version of the MiG-21. The Bison was born out of pragmatism. India knew it couldn't immediately replace hundreds of MiG-21s with costly fourth or fifth generation aircraft. So instead, they partnered with Russian and Israeli firms to breathe new life into an aging frame. The upgraded Bison came equipped with Kopio pulse Doppler radar, a glass cockpit, A-73 close combat missiles, and a helmet-mounted sight HMS system, allowing pilots to lock onto targets simply by looking at them. These features made the Bison shockingly agile in within visual range WVR combat, giving it the ability to surprise even more advanced opponents in a dogfight. But for all its enhancements, it remained a legacy aircraft. No stealth, limited situational awareness, and a relatively short range. The Indian Air Force used the Bison strategically, often stationing them near the border for quick reaction alerts, scrambling them at a moment's notice to intercept unknown aircraft across the border. Pakistan's F-16s were undergoing their own transformation. The early F-16AB models, still in service, had received midlife upgrades, MLUs, a program that introduced advanced avionics, night vision compatibility, color displays, and most critically, the ability to fire beyond visual range BVR missiles like the AIM-120 AMRAAM. With these upgrades, older Falcons were brought close to Block 50 level capabilities. Meanwhile, newer F-16CD Block 52 variants formed the elite spearhead of the Pakistan Air Force, equipped with an APG-68 radar, joint helmet-mounted cueing systems JHMCS, and precision-guided weapons. These jets were designed not just to intercept, but to lead surgical strikes, day or night, in contested environments. By 2019, Pakistan had also integrated these F-16s into a wider network-centric architecture using airborne early warning and control systems, AWACS, ground-based radar, and data links to coordinate operations with speed and precision. This doctrine emphasized situational awareness, first look, first shot, first kill tactics, especially valuable in BVR combat. But both air forces were facing a familiar set of modern challenges: rising maintenance costs, aging airframes, and an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape. The MiG-21, for all its upgrades, remained a jet past its design life. The F-16, while still relevant, was facing competition from stealthier platforms and fifth-generation adversaries. India was already investing in replacements rafales from France, Tijot's light combat aircraft, and even looking toward future fifth-generation platforms. Pakistan, in parallel, was co-developing the JF-17 Thunder, a cost-effective multi-role fighter that could gradually reduce reliance on the F-16 fleet. And yet, in February 2019, these legacy jets would be chosen to represent their nations in an encounter that was anything but legacy. But there's one more element to consider: information warfare. In this contemporary era, dogfights are no longer just about who pulls the trigger first. They're about who controls the narrative. Radar data, electronic jamming, satellite imagery, social media, press briefings. Today, every missile fired echoes not just in the air, but across diplomatic desks and global headlines. In the next section, we move into the aftermath. Because when the MiG-21 Bison and the F-16 finally collided in the skies above Kashmir, the world didn't just witness a clash of aircraft, it witnessed the climax of decades of evolution, strategy, and geopolitics in one heart-stopping moment. In the early hours of February 27, 2019, two fighter jets designed in different decades for different wars by rival superpowers collided in a modern battlefield that neither original engineer could have ever imagined. The MiG-21 Bison and the F-16 didn't just fight that day. They resurrected old questions about legacy, relevance, and the future of aerial warfare. What followed wasn't just a matter of wreckage on a hillside or radar blips on a screen. It was a national reckoning on both sides. For India, the downing of a Pakistani aircraft HIF confirmed with symbolic proof that even an aging MiG-21, in the hands of a skilled pilot, could still make history. Wing Commander Abhinandan's capture and return became a unifying moment, broadcast to millions, and his mustache became a meme of modern heroism. The Bison, long criticized as obsolete, briefly transformed into a symbol of courage, training, and raw tenacity. For Pakistan, the use of F-16s wasn't just about defense, it was about demonstrating capability, control, and modern doctrine. Denials and counterclaims about whether an F-16 had been downed weren't just technical, they were political theater. Because whoever controlled the narrative of the dogfight controlled the perception of superiority. In a world of high deterrence, perception is power, but the deeper legacy lies in what these jets revealed, that platforms endure, but strategy evolves. The MiG-21 and F-16, each a marvel of its own era, became vessels for new technologies, new doctrines, and new politics. Their survival proved that no aircraft is ever truly obsolete and unadapted. The clash also inspired reflection across the military-industrial world. Nations watched closely, analysts scrutinized radar logs, defense planners re-evaluated interception tactics, pilot training, and information warfare strategies. The encounter influenced procurement debates and Air Force modernization plans, from South Asia to NATO. And it reminded the world of one quiet but powerful truth. In the age of drones, stealth, and satellites, the human element, the pilot, the decision, the split-second instinct still matters. So what did we learn? That even the oldest machines, when paired with modern vision and human courage, can still shape history. And that the dogfight over Kashmir wasn't just a fleeting confrontation, it was a milestone where legacy met reality at 30,000 feet. But what lies ahead? Could this encounter have been the last of its kind or just the beginning of a new era of hybrid warfare? Let's explore what the future may hold. As the MiG-21 and F-16 slowly fade from frontline service, the skies above South Asia and beyond are changing. The future of air combat is no longer shaped solely by metal and thrust, but by data, stealth, and artificial intelligence. India is already transitioning toward more modern platforms. The acquisition of the Dassault Rafale, the development of the indigenous HAL Tejas, and future ambitions for a fifth-generation stealth fighter program signal a move toward deeper technological independence and multi-role flexibility. Meanwhile, Unmanned combat aerial vehicles UCAVs like the GOTAC project are quietly laying the foundation for a new kind of deterrent, one with no cockpit, but all the capability. Pakistan, too, is pivoting. The JF-17 Thunder, co-developed with China, continues to evolve through newer block variants. But beyond jets, Pakistan is investing in integrated air defense systems, networked communication, and surveillance drones. The focus is clear: build a responsive, layered air strategy, capable of both deterrence and precision. Globally, the future lies in hybrid air fleets, a mix of manned fighters, autonomous drones, and high-altitude surveillance systems, all linked through secure data links and AI-enhanced decision-making. The next conflict may not even begin with a fighter scramble. It may begin with a satellite feed, a cyber intrusion, or a drone swarm. So, will there ever be another MiG-21 versus F-16 style dogfight? Perhaps not in the same form, but the essence, the rapid reaction, the chase, the critical decisions made in split seconds will persist. Only now, those moments may unfold faster, with machine learning assisting the trigger pull and algorithms deciding the tactics. But here's the real question: in this evolving arena of autonomous warfare, where machines fly and data decides how, will humanity retain control? Will future pilots be just monitors, or will their instincts still guide the machines? Tell us what you think. Will the skies of tomorrow still echo with the roar of engines or the silence of drones? The debate is far from over. Let's wrap it all up. From Cold War blueprints to a high-stakes dogfight over Kashmir, the story of the MiG-21 and the F-16 is a story of endurance, reinvention, and symbolism. What began as two competing visions of aerial dominance evolved into icons of national defense, shaped by technology, elevated by politics, and tested in combat. In February 2019, the skies above South Asia reminded the world that history doesn't just live in museums, it flies, it fights, and it still shapes our future. If you found this deep dive into aerial warfare and geopolitical history thought-provoking, make sure to like this video, share it with others who love military history, and subscribe for more long-form investigations into the machines and moments that shaped our world. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the era of manned dogfights is truly over, or is it simply evolving? Drop your answer in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.